When we talk about knee pain later in life, we often talk about it as if it were an unavoidable chapter, something written quietly into the biology of aging. People say it casually, "Of course my knees hurt, I'm over 60," as if the joint itself has decided to give up, as if time alone were the culprit. But the human body is rarely that simple, and it is almost never that passive. What we experience as pain is not just the result of years passing, but of relationships changing inside the body, relationships between muscles and joints, between movement and rest, between use and neglect. When we look at the knee through this lens, something interesting happens. The story shifts from inevitability to possibility. The knee is a remarkable structure. It is not a single mechanism, but a conversation between bones, cartilage, ligaments, tendons, muscles, and the nervous system. Every step you take is a negotiation. The knee accepts load, distributes force, adapts to uneven ground, and responds instantly to signals from the brain. It was never designed to work in isolation. In fact, the knee is more like a bridge than a hinge. Its strength depends on what supports it from above and below. When those supports weaken, the bridge doesn't collapse immediately, but strain accumulates, and eventually the system begins to protest. Pain is often that protest. As we age, one of the most significant changes in the body is not joint degeneration itself, but muscle loss. Starting as early as our 30s, we gradually lose muscle mass if it is not actively maintained. This process, known as sarcopenia, accelerates with inactivity. By the time many people reach their 60s or 70s, the muscles that once protected their joints have quietly thinned. The knee, which relies heavily on the strength and coordination of the thigh and hip muscles, suddenly finds itself exposed. The joint absorbs forces it was never meant to handle alone. Over time, cartilage wears faster, inflammation increases, and movements that were once effortless begin to feel risky. What's fascinating is that this process is not irreversible. Muscle tissue is uniquely responsive, even in older adults. Unlike cartilage, which has limited capacity to regenerate, muscle responds robustly to the right stimulus. When we strengthen the muscles around the knee, we are not simply adding power, we are restoring balance. We are redistributing load away from sensitive joint surfaces and back into tissue that is designed to bear it. This is not a mechanical fix in the simplistic sense. It is a biological conversation resumed. Consider the quadriceps, the large muscles on the front of the thigh. These muscles are often described as knee extensors, but that description barely scratches the surface of their role. The quadriceps act as dynamic brakes. When you walk downhill, descend stairs, or lower yourself into a chair, they control the bending of the knee. Without adequate quadriceps strength, these movements become abrupt, jarring, and stressful to the joint. The knee loses its shock absorbers. Pain follows not because movement is harmful, but because movement is no longer well managed. What's particularly interesting is how specific portions of the quadriceps influence knee health. The inner portion, often overlooked, plays a critical role in guiding the kneecap as the knee bends and straightens. When this muscle weakens, the kneecap may track slightly off course, increasing friction and irritation. This misalignment is subtle. Most people never feel it happening, but over time the joint feels less reliable, less smooth. Strengthening this area doesn't just build muscle, it restores precision. Then there are the hamstrings, the muscles at the back of the thigh. They are frequently overshadowed by the quadriceps in popular discussions of knee strength, yet they are essential partners. The knee functions best when the muscles on the front and back of the thigh are in balance. If one group dominates, the joint is pulled unevenly. This imbalance alters how forces pass through the knee with every step. The hamstrings help decelerate the leg during walking, protect the knee during sudden changes in direction, and stabilize the joint during transitions like standing up or sitting down. Weak hamstrings don't announce themselves loudly. They simply allow inefficiency to creep in, and inefficiency, over time, becomes pain. Beyond individual muscles, there is endurance, the quiet, sustained strength that allows us to remain upright, mobile, and confident for more than a few moments at a time. Many people can generate brief bursts of strength, but struggle with activities that require holding a position or repeating a movement for several minutes. This is where isometric strength becomes deeply relevant. Isometric contractions, where muscles work without visible movement, train the body to sustain support. They teach muscles to remain engaged, to protect joints continuously rather than intermittently. From a biological perspective, this kind of training improves how force is transmitted through tendons and how joints are stabilized under constant load. What's remarkable is how these adaptations occur even in later life. Tendons become more efficient at transmitting force. Muscles improve their ability to coordinate. The nervous system refines its control, reducing unnecessary tension and improving alignment. None of this requires extreme effort. It requires consistency, attention, and respect for the body's capacity to adapt. Pain, in this context, becomes less of an enemy and more of a signal. It tells us where support is lacking, where communication between tissues has broken down. When someone experiences knee pain while climbing stairs, it is not simply the stairs that are the problem. It is the demand placed on a system that no longer has adequate resources. Restore those resources, and the same stairs become manageable again. Sometimes even enjoyable. There is also a psychological dimension to this process that science increasingly acknowledges. Pain changes behavior. When movement hurts, people move less. When they move less, muscles weaken further. This creates a feedback loop that accelerates decline. Breaking that loop requires more than motivation. It requires movements that feel safe, controlled, and purposeful. Exercises performed in stable positions, with clear sensory feedback, help rebuild trust between the brain and the body. Over time, confidence returns, and with it, willingness to move. What often surprises people is how quickly these changes can begin. Not overnight, but within weeks. This is not because the body is performing miracles, but because it is returning to patterns it once knew well. Muscles remember how to work. The nervous system remembers efficient movement. When given the right signals, the body responds with remarkable generosity. It's important to understand that this process is not about pushing through pain or forcing the body to behave like it did decades ago. It is about meeting the body where it is now. Slow, controlled movements allow tissues to adapt without irritation. Rest days allow the biology of repair to unfold. Progression is gradual, not because the body is fragile, but because adaptation is cumulative. Each repetition sends a message. Each day of consistency reinforces that message. There is something deeply human about this approach. It respects aging without surrendering to it. It acknowledges limitation without defining identity by it. When someone in their 70s regains the ability to climb stairs without fear or walk longer distances without discomfort, the change is not just physical. It alters how they perceive their future. Mobility is independence. Stability is confidence. Strength is not just about muscles, it is about possibility. From a scientific standpoint, what we are really doing when we strengthen the muscles around the knee is altering load distribution. Forces that once concentrated in small areas of cartilage are spread across larger, more resilient tissues. Inflammation decreases because tissues are no longer being overstressed. Movement becomes smoother because muscles are coordinating more effectively. The joint environment becomes less hostile, more forgiving. This is why targeted exercise can sometimes delay or even eliminate the need for more invasive interventions. Surgery addresses structure, but strength addresses function. Often, improving function reduces symptoms enough that structural intervention becomes unnecessary. This is not a rejection of medical care, but a recognition that the body has intrinsic tools for resilience when properly supported. It is also why simplicity matters. Complex routines can overwhelm, leading to inconsistency. Simple movements performed well, with attention and intention, create clarity. The body thrives on clarity. It responds best when signals are clear, repeated, and meaningful. A few minutes a day, done regularly, can reshape how tissues behave under load. As we reflect on this, it becomes clear that knee health is not just about knees. It is about how we relate to our bodies as they change. Do we see aging as a process of inevitable loss, or as a shifting landscape that requires new strategies? Science increasingly supports the latter view. The capacity for adaptation does not disappear with age. It simply requires a different approach. There is also compassion in this perspective. Many people blame themselves for pain, believing they did something wrong or failed to stay active enough. In reality, modern life often discourages the kind of movement our bodies need. Long periods of sitting, reduced physical demands, and fear of injury all contribute. Understanding this removes blame and replaces it with curiosity. What does my body need now? What signals is it giving me? When we answer those questions thoughtfully, the response does not have to be dramatic. It can be quiet. A chair, a wall, a few deliberate movements. The body listens. Over time, it responds. Strength returns, not as a youthful imitation, but as an age-appropriate resilience that supports daily life. Perhaps the most profound shift comes when movement is no longer something to fear. When the knee feels stable again, walking becomes exploratory rather than cautious. Stairs become steps rather than obstacles. Even standing still feels different when the muscles are engaged and supportive. This is not just physical rehabilitation. It is a restoration of agency. Science gives us the framework to understand why this works, but lived experience gives it meaning. When someone realizes they can do more than they thought, that realization ripples outward. It affects how they plan their days, how they engage with others, how they imagine the years ahead. Health, in this sense, is not just the absence of pain. It is the presence of capability. And capability is built, quietly, through small acts repeated with care. The knee, once seen as a fragile joint worn down by time, becomes what it has always been, a participant in a larger system, responsive to support, capable of adaptation. When we honor that system, when we strengthen what surrounds the joint rather than focusing solely on the joint itself, we align with the body's natural design. This approach does not promise perfection. Some stiffness may remain. Some days will feel better than others. That variability is part of being human. But within that variability lies a steady trend toward greater stability, reduced pain, and improved confidence. The science supports it, but more importantly, the body demonstrates it. In the end, the story of knee health after 60 is not a story of decline. It is a story of redistribution, of effort, of load, of attention. When we redirect stress away from vulnerable structures and into resilient ones, we change the experience of movement itself. The knee no longer bears the burden alone, and in that shared effort, pain often loosens its grip. What emerges is not just stronger legs, but a renewed relationship with movement, one rooted in understanding, patience, and respect for the remarkable adaptability of the human body at every stage of life.